Welcome to the Betting News Network. Thank you so much for tuning in right here on YouTube. In this video and in so many more videos to follow, we are going to be getting you guys ready for the 2025-2026 NFL season and doing divisional breakdowns for you. That is just Sukh. My name is Sweatpan Jesus, aka Daniel Collins. You guys can find us on Twitter or anywhere else that you look for us on social media. You can also follow all of our content at bettingnews.com. and get involved with everything that we have right here on YouTube. Like and subscribe this content if this video is going to be helpful for you. We're going to have a lot of divisional previews moving forward, Sukh, as we get closer and closer to the start of the NFL season. So if you like this video, feel free to subscribe to the channel and get involved with all of our content that we have every single day. In this video, though, we are going to be starting with the North. We're going to be breaking down the AFC North, the NFC North, and getting involved with two of the most competitive divisions that we saw in the NFL last season. This video is going to be breaking down what happened with those teams last season, some acquisitions that they had going into this year, some losses that those teams had, and kind of what we think is going to happen with those teams going into the season this season. Sukh, before we get into it, you got anything you want to say before we hop straight into the AFC North?
No, just feels good to be talking football.
Absolutely. Hope you guys are having a fantastic summer out there wherever you're tuning into this content. But let's get straight to it. Let's talk about the AFC North, one of the most competitive divisions in football last season. As we saw quite a few things happen in the season. There was a lot of transactions in the offseason. We're going to break down everything for you guys right now. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens were at the top of the division last year, then followed by the Cincinnati Bengals. The Steelers also have made some noise last year as they made the playoffs, and then the Browns were the lowly portions of this particular division. The Ravens were 12-5 last year. The Steelers were 10-7. The Bengals were 9-8, and the Browns, as I mentioned, were 3-14. This season, we're looking at the odds here via our friends at Bet Online. Baltimore Ravens minus 145 to win the division. The Cincinnati Bengals are plus 225 to win the division. The Steelers coming in at third at plus 550, and the Browns at plus 3,000 at the bottom. We'll talk about them in just a few minutes as to why they're at the bottom of this division. But before we jump into each individual team, anything about the odds and kind of what we saw last season with these teams and kind of what we're looking at going into this season?
Just impressed about how good this division is, top to bottom. We still laugh at the Browns, but those top three teams there, they got firepower for days. They can match you on both sides of the football. So this is a tough division. It'd be hard to be a member of this division every single year. Looking at you, Cincinnati, last year you had all of those amazing stats put up by your offensive side of the football, but the defensive side could not keep anybody off of the scoreboard. So this is a fun but tough division. Fun to watch, tough to be in.
Yep, you had the two top dogs in this division, obviously, from a statistical perspective, being the Ravens and the Bengals. Obviously, the Steelers ended up sneaking into the playoffs last year with Mike Tomlin pulling his Mike Tomlin magic, but they were the ones that made the most offseason moves, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And then obviously we'll find out if the Browns have anything to say this season as well. Let's jump into the winners of this division last year and talk about the Baltimore Ravens. The over-under for the Baltimore Ravens this season is 11.5. So if you kind of think that they're going to replicate the performances of what they saw last year at getting 12 wins once again, the 11.5 is a nice bet by our friends at Bet Online. Let's talk about a few additions that this team had. Obviously, they added DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. Chidode Awuzie also joined the team. Jair Alexander, Cooper Rush as a backup quarterback. Malachi Starks got drafted, and they re-signed Patrick Ricard to lead the way for Derrick Henry. No major losses for this team. There were some cuts, and there were some guys that ended up not returning by signed contracts and stuff like that, but nothing of note specifically. Looking at this team, and looking at what they're able to do, running it back with John Harbaugh, running it back with Lamar Jackson, running it back with, obviously, Derrick Henry. No real changes at the wide receiver position except for bringing in DeAndre Hopkins. They did re-sign Isaiah Likely also to a long contract extension and similar numbers to what we saw from Mark Andrews. What is your kind of outlook for this team going into this season? I mean, I like this team. We've liked Lamar Jackson, obviously. I think that they have to get to the point where they can finally put something next to these good seasons we've seen back to back. What do you kind of think is going on with the Ravens this year?
I feel like the Ravens suffer from success. They've just been such a good football team for so long, but they haven't been able to get over the hump and lift that trophy and be the last team standing at the end of the season. And I just think that it's this weird situation of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time are you good enough? Are you going to finally get over the hump and become a champion? I think that you're seeing that 11.5 win total that shows you that Vegas thinks that they're still going to be an elite football team. And I don't know if I touch that 11.5 over, but this is definitely one of the best teams in football, and it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, I mean, they do have weapons. Obviously, we're going to see if Zay Flowers maybe takes another step to become possibly a legitimate, bona fide number one wide receiver in the NFL. DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously as a Titans fan, I know how much DeAndre still has left in the tank, even though he is in the back half of his career. I think he's going to help this team. But at the end of the day, this is just going to hinge on how these guys, as you said, handle success. I mean, Lamar Jackson has been an two-time MVP. We saw an incredible season from him last year, and they just didn't quite get the job done in the playoffs. So Derrick Henry's going to have a lot to say for this team as well. He also quoted when Ricard got re-signed that when he's leading the way for me, I'm happy. So I'm sure El Tractorcito is going to have a lot to say once again this season going into year as a 32-year-old, year number 2 with the Baltimore Ravens.
Is this the year, SPJ? Is this the year we finally get the regression that's been promised for 4 years?
I don't think so until proven otherwise. He's just a machine. And I mean, you know, my bias towards Derrick Henry, but I just, this is such a good system for him. And I talked about this last season going into, put the crown on. I talked about this last year, obviously massive Derrick Henry fan with all of his years with the Tennessee Titans and then what he was able to do in his first season with the Ravens. We talked about it on another show. I mean, he had a lot of carries last year, incredible amount of touchdowns, but his yards per carry was one of the best in the NFL. I think 5.9 yards per carry. So it didn't look like he was slowing down to me. This system fits him so well. This offensive line is so geared towards blocking for running with that zone scheme that they run in Baltimore. So I think the 1-2 punch of Lamar and Derrick Henry are going to hit you in the mouth early and often throughout the season. And I don't see a regression necessarily for this offense. We'll see if the defense has similar things to say as what we saw last year. Obviously, with adding Jair Alexander from the Packers is going to be interesting to see if he is able to have something to say after kind of his Packers tenure ended maybe a little not as like everybody would have liked. But I like this team. I think this team, as much as I hate to say it, I think this team is going to be competing to win this division once again this year, and they're going to have a lot to say when we get into January and possibly February. We shall see. But let's jump to the next team that we need to talk about. Not necessarily second in the rankings last season, but they had a lot of things to say in the stats category. The Cincinnati Bengals, 9-8 last season. Their over/under is 9.5 this year. So if you think that they maybe perform a little bit better this year, the 9.5 win total by our friends at BetOnline might be a move if you're feeling good about that. Some major additions that this team had. Honestly, Sukh, it was mostly in the coaching department. Al Golden replaces Lou Anarumo on the defensive coordinating side, which is something we'll talk about in a second. Scott Peters replaces Frank Pollock on the offensive line coach. They re-signed T. Higgins. They obviously gave Jamar Chase a ginormous contract as well as the number one best wide receiver in football, as he so deserved. They had a few other pieces that they added for like guys like Mike Gesicki as well that they re-signed, but the subtractions to this team. Sam Hubbard retired, which is going to be a piece that they're probably going to end up missing. Jermaine Pratt also left this team. And the last point on this before we kind of talk about outlook is what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson. They still haven't signed him to a contract extension. They don't know how that's going to kind of look. He's already said that he's not going to play this year under his contract that he has where he would make $16 million. I mean, it makes sense as one of the best, if not arguably the best defensive end in the NFL. Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. I'm interested to see how Al Golden replaces Lou Anarumo and how bad this defense was last year. What you're kind of thinking on what the Bengals are going to do this year, and are they finally going to take the next step and be a legitimate elite team and have some stuff to say in the playoffs?
Well, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to sign Trey. Trey is definitely going to have to be in that opening day roster. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble because 5 of the last 6 seasons, SPJ, this team has gone off to an 0-2 start in their first 2 games. They cannot start off from behind again in this division, and they know that. They have to get better on the defensive side of the football. That's why they spent 3 of their first 6 draft picks, including their first-round pick, on defensive position players. So this Bengals team knows that they've shored up their offense. They've gotten everybody under contract for the next 2 years, but now the defensive end needs to pull their weight as well. So that'll be exciting to see. And I'm very much hoping that if the Bengals want to compete in this division, they're not going to get off to another bad 0-2 start because you bury yourself early, Bengals.
I mean, Joe Burrow's talked about it. Obviously, it came out on the Netflix quarterback, season 2 of all the behind the scenes stuff of him being so frustrated with some of their in-game play, even games they were winning. He was frustrated by their play. And that's just a sign of a leader, somebody who knows that we're not playing the best football we can play. And yeah, that might lead to some wins against some lesser teams in the regular season, but that's not going to get you to the playoffs. And if it does get you to the playoffs, it's not going to win you a Super Bowl. So, I'm interested to see how this team responds this year. I think that the clock is ticking on this current roster iteration. I agree with you. They need to sign Trey Hendrickson yesterday. They need to get that deal done. They obviously did a good job of getting T. Higgins his contract extension, which was what he deserved as well. They're running back the offensive side. They need to bring in the defensive pieces necessary. Hopefully the coaching will be a little bit better this season. I like this team a lot. I'm a big Joe Burrow guy. I think that he's definitely got the goods to get them to a Super Bowl. It's just going to depend on how this team does around him this season. I could see him having a similar season like he saw last year. I could see Jamar Chase having a similar season like we saw last year. So I think this team offensively is going to cause a lot of people problems this year if their defense can be average instead of the very subpar they were last year. This team's going to win a lot of games this year. Kind of sneaky, not kind of foreshadowing towards the end. I think they can compete to win this division. So I like the Bengals this year. And as much as I hate to say it, I think that this team is going to have a lot to say when we get to January. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's move through the rest of this division. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lots of moves happened for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. Obviously, they still made the playoffs. You know, Mike Tomlin pulled his Mike Tomlin magic, 10-7 last year. Another winning season in Pittsburgh. Their over-under this season, though, is very interesting, 8.5, so a little bit lower than what we saw last year. And that's because there's so many question marks for this team, so many moving parts that have happened. They had additions that have been widely talked about throughout the entire offseason, Aaron Rodgers being the biggest one of them, coming in and playing quarterback, and as Justin Fields and Russell Wilson experiments have passed. They signed DK Metcalf to come to town. Kenneth Gainwell's also in town. They also bolstered their defensive and also lost a couple pieces defensively with Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey coming to town. Jonnu Smith joins this team as well, and Juan Thornhill also defensively. So lots of additions, and of course that's going to lead to a lot of subtractions. Minka Fitzpatrick is also lost in this team. He's gone to the Dolphins in that part of that move I talked about earlier. George Pickens is gone to the Dallas Cowboys. Najee Harris is no longer going to be the main bell cow back for this team. Dan Moore got signed by the Tennessee Titans, so he will not be the left tackle for this team anymore. And as I said, they also drafted Derek Herman and Caleb Johnson to take over some of those backfield duties. So a lot of changes in this team. Lots of changes. The coaching staff has stayed pretty much the same. Obviously, Mike Tomlin's still running the ship. To me, before you talk about what you think with this team is going to totally hinge on if Aaron Rodgers can have a good season this year. If Aaron Rodgers can be a above average / good / possibly elite quarterback, this team is going to be good. They have a really good defense. They were great last year defensively. That kept them in so many games. But if they can get consistent, solid, sometimes elite quarterback play. I mean, we saw it at stretches last year. Russell Wilson, after he took over for Justin Fields when he was totally healthy, it wasn't fantastic from Russ, but he won them some games. He was making some deep throws. He was moving the offense. And with this Pittsburgh Steelers style of play, that's going to win you football games. So I think if Aaron Rodgers has a good last, quote unquote, last season, last hurrah in Pittsburgh, this team's going to be fun. And I think that they could actually win a lot of games too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think they are going to win a lot of games. They have a athletic and very young offensive line. They got Zach Frazier under center, who I think is fantastic. You saw him deal with all those quarterback issues last year, and he was completely good, solid. That's tough to see for a rookie center. So now with Aaron Rodgers, I think that they might build a nice rapport here, and they might be able to protect him. We know that Rodgers has never been the most fleet of foot, but now he's got age and miles on him, but now he's also got a very young front line in front of him, and he's got a great safety valve in Pat Freiermuth, who had his breakout season last year. So you know me, I like Tomlin, I like the Steelers, I like black, I like gold, I like this team.
Well, you got Pat Freiermuth. As again, Jonnu Smith's coming to town too. I really like Jonnu Smith. That was a nice pickup from the Dolphins. You got Jalen Warren in the backfield too, who's a great pass catching back. Aaron Rodgers is going to have his fun with Arthur Smith running the offense with that play action style that he brings to the table as well. I just think that if Rodgers, and we talked about this on another show, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers actually had a pretty good year last year for the Jets. Like that team was not very good.
Borderline top 10.
He was pretty decent. Like he looked pretty good at stretches. And if he can have that throughout this, because the Jets kind of just fell apart in particular portions, which we'll talk about that obviously in our AFC East preview. But like that is just, I think if he plays a tiny bit better than that, like they're going to be good because of how good their defense is. It's just that's the Steeler way, you know? So they're going to be frisky in this division. I kind of like the over 8.5 for them to win 9 games. Mike Tomlin hasn't lost 9 games since, I was a child. So I think that that's a nice bet if you want to just bet on trends. I see them competing most of every single game this season. They're going to be competing in this division, and I can see them winning 9 to 10 games again and possibly sneaking into the playoffs. Do I think they have the oomph to win this division? I don't think so, but who knows? Maybe Rodgers and Metcalf really click and that goes really well. Maybe another guy kind of surprises a little bit more and we see this team really shine. But I think it's going to be fun for this team in Pittsburgh, and kind of go from some fun. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns last season is a season to forget for this franchise, but unfortunately, I don't know if it's going to get much better. 3-14 last year. The over/under is set at 5.5 for the Browns this year at the bottom of the division. They also had a lot of moving parts. There's obviously still the albatross of Deshaun Watson hanging over this franchise's head. You've got Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco coming to town. You've got Tevin Jenkins who brought to town. You got Cornelius Lucas. You got Joe Tyron Shoyinka. You got Devin Bush. You got Malik Collins. You re-signed Myles Garrett. I mean, yeah, duh. You got Deontay Johnson also coming to town too. So lots of different moving parts in there. Some of those guys are probably going to play some substantial minutes and a lot of snaps for this team. Whether or not they end up moving the needle, we will find out. They drafted Mason Graham in the top 5 of the draft this season from Michigan. He's a pretty highly touted defensive tackle. A lot of people are very excited about what he can do next to Myles Garrett on that defensive line. You lose Nick Chubb, but everybody kind of believes, I myself included, that he is definitely on the back half of his career with the injury problems that he's had. What is your kind of takeaway from the Browns this season? I kind of like what I feel like Joe Flacco is possibly going to be able to do with this team. This team could be frisky offensively. Jerry Jeudy looked really good to finish off the year last year with Jameis Winston throwing him the football.
Mm-hmm.
But does this team have a chance to compete in this division at all?
I don't think this team has a chance to compete at all or make any noise. I wouldn't even take that very low win total because you are not doing a service to your locker room when you're not having a clear leader. We know this. We don't have to explain to anybody in football, but your quarterback is the guy in charge. Your quarterback's kind of the one who everyone looks to. And right now, you have a room full of dudes that nobody knows if they're the starter. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. You have one guy that's kind of considered like the premier prospect, but you also took Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. So I very much think that you haven't done what needs to be done to have a healthy locker room. And I just think that football is just such a violent, toxic, aggressive sport, short weeks. Like, you need good leadership. And right now, I don't see a leader in this Browns locker room. I haven't seen a leader on the Browns since Baker Mayfield was there.
Shout out Baker. I like Joe Flacco, but he's 40 years old. Like he's probably going to just get them through to the point where they throw Shedeur out there or they throw Dylan Gabriel out there and just go have some fun. I think eventually this team could end up tanking the rest of their season because they just need to get past this Deshaun
Who do you
Watson
think
contract.
plays first? Gabriel or Sanders?
I would say Sanders if I had to choose off the top of my head. But I don't know. We'll see how these guys perform in training camp, as training camp's also right around the corner, depending on when you're watching this video. But I think that Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback week 1 for this team. I think that he would give them the best opportunity to go into the season with looking like a decent football team. I don't think Kenny Pickett's going to do that, and neither of the rookies are going to be ready. And I don't think they're going to want to start off by putting Shedeur Sanders out there and just going, all right, buddy, figure it out. So Myles Garrett obviously re-signing was huge because he committed his long-term future to this franchise. So I think we might see another couple seasons of just not great play in Cleveland. And then hopefully they can maybe get something moving forward, maybe next year in the draft again or something like that, but not really high on this team this year. I'm with you. I would not take that over 5.5 win total. I could see this team being another top 5 draft pick next season as we move forward, but we shall see how the
Miles.
I know. I was kind of surprised he re-signed. I mean, they threw the bag at him, so that was probably enough for him at that particular point. But hey, we'll see. We've been wrong about a lot of things previously. Maybe the Browns are going to be friskier than we think. But let us know in the comments if you're watching this video on YouTube who you think is going to be the winner or the best team in the AFC North. Sukh, before we move on to the NFC North, what is your team that you think is going to win the AFC North?
I think the Ravens win again. I just think they're, like I said, the best team on both sides of the football. They have just such a wealth of talent on both sides that it's hard to overcome that as any team. And then you put the cherry on top of a coaching staff that knows how to just win games. It's tough to see anybody else over toppling them. I know that you think somebody is going to do it. Who dey?
I love Derrick Henry. I love Lamar Jackson. I think Derrick Henry is going to dominate again this year. but I think that this could be the Bengals season to win this division. I really do. I really think that I think that they're going to do enough defensively. I think Joe Burrow heard enough last year about how bad this team was to start the season, and also, like you said, in really close games. I think off the top of my head, I want to say that they lost 7 games by a possession or less. Maybe we can check that post video production to make sure that I'm in my right with my brain on that assessment. But they lost a lot of really close games last year. And you flip 2 or 3 of those into wins, this team wins, 12 games. So I think that this team has an opportunity to be very good if Joe Burrow plays like an MVP candidate, if Jamar Chase has another possible triple crown type season. Yeah, give me the Bengals. I'm going to take the value on the Bengals to win this division at the plus money. Okay, that was the AFC North. Feels good to talk football, man. That was the AFC North. Let's talk about the King of the North on the NFC side. Let's jump to it and talk about the NFC North. If you tuned into this video, thank you for stopping by to talk about the AFC North. If you're here for the NFC North, welcome. We're going to talk all about this division. One of the most competitive divisions in football last year. It's going to be looking like that again this year. Like we said previously, give us a like and a subscribe on this channel if you like football content, if you like sports betting content, and if you like vibes. We post content every single day at bettingnews.com, and we go live every single day right here on YouTube and across all social platforms. Let's jump in directly and talk about this division as a whole. We obviously have the Detroit Lions, winners of this division last season at 15-2. The Vikings were also a number 2 in this division, would have been the winner of a lot of other divisions if the Lions were incredible last year at 14-3. The Packers were still very frisky at 11-6. And then obviously the Bears fit 5-12, not exactly the season they wanted to start off Caleb Williams' career, but we'll talk about them in just a few minutes. The odds for all 4 of these teams for this season going into the 2025-2026 season, the Detroit Lions plus 135, still the favorites, even though they've had a lot of moving parts, which we'll talk about in a minute. Green Bay Packers plus 260, the Minnesota Vikings plus 360, and then the Chicago Bears plus 450. So not as much discrepancy between the top 4 as we saw in the AFC North. The top 4 could be jumbled around, but let's start off with the winners of last year and everything that they saw as the Detroit Lions were not able to get over the hump, what we saw in the playoffs, but still had a fantastic regular season. 15-2, like I mentioned, their over-under is only 10.5 this year, which I thought was very interesting. They added DJ Reed in the offseason, but to be honest, there's a lot more losses to talk about than there were additions to this team. They lost Carlton Davis, their talented cornerback. They lost Kevin Zeitler, their offensive lineman. They lost Ladarius Smith. They also lost a lot of coaching. They lost Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, their wizard next to Dan Campbell. He has gone on to another NFC North opponent, the Chicago Bears, which we'll talk about in a minute, to head coach there. And then Aaron Glenn, obviously their defensive coordinator, has now gone to coach in New York for the New York Jets. So the new offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions is Sean Morton, who was a senior offensive assistant for this team. So he knows the offensive system pretty well. The new defensive coordinator is Kelvin Shepard. He was the linebacker coach for this team, and he's been with the team since 2021. So continuity stays the same in the coaching staff, even though you lose your 2 heads of the snake necessarily on both of the sides of the football. Dan Campbell's still there. Dan Campbell's still going to run a tight ship. All their major offensive weapons are still there. Didn't lose anybody really defensively either. They lost a couple of offensive linemen, like I mentioned. They lost Carlton Davis defensively. What's your outlook for this team this season? What do you think about what they're going to be able to accomplish? I don't think they're going to win 15 games again. I think we can both agree on that, right?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm not such a big believer. I know that they lost a lot of good, capable coaches, but I really do value on Jared Goff talking about how much freedom he actually had in that offense and how much decision making he was actually doing. So I think that on that side of the football, they might be not losing as much of a step as people think. I also think it's interesting that Jahmyr Gibbs is already talking about lining up more on the outside this year so that he can be on the field at the same time as David Montgomery this year, which will be a nice little change. Obviously, they lost their center, who retired really surprisingly at 29, but I think they'll get over that. And just overall, I just think that this team is just good enough that they're going to plug the holes. They're going to have next man up mentality. I know we've been laughing at all the sound bites that come out of their locker room, but I really do believe that they're a very deep team. And then on the defensive side of the football, I think Aiden Hutchinson, having him back fully healthy is going to be very interesting. He's coming into his 4th year, and it's scary to see that after that horrific injury last year, that he's already saying that with that injury or without that injury, he's right where he would want to be entering his 4th year in the NFL, and he is chasing the bag, TJ Watt type contract. So I think we see him coming out ready to go, and he's a leader of men, so he might have that whole defensive unit trying to play up to his level. So I'm actually weirdly thinking that maybe not that 15 games, but I don't know, maybe. I'm not betting the under.
Absolutely not. I think the 10.5 is a little bit disrespectful. I think this team can still win 11 or 12 games. It's not like I said, you lose both of your leaders of the defense and the offense, but they just promoted guys who learned how to run the offense and the defense in the exact same way. So I have a feeling that they're going to probably run the same systems, and these guys are probably going to get to add their little nuances to them. But like, I don't think they're going to change they're not going to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Aiden Hutchinson coming back is a huge point. I forgot to mention that in the additions, because it feels like an addition. You're getting he was playing like an all-pro last year before he got hurt. And, that leg injury was gruesome, that break that he had against the Cowboys, but like, breaking your leg is a lot better than blowing out your knee. It sucks. It looks bad. It doesn't feel good. I'm sure he obviously had to rehab a lot, but those injuries don't take as much to get back from as like an MCL or an ACL or an Achilles or something like that. Tendon injuries usually end up taking a lot longer, and then it takes a lot longer to recover back to get to 100%. Whereas if you break your leg like that, again, sucks, but he's going to be back, like you mentioned. So huge for him this season, how that's going to affect their defense and how he was playing going into when that injury happened last year. I think this is going to hinge on Jared Goff. Like we saw last year, he had a spectacular season, fell apart a little bit in the playoffs, which is why they ended up not going to the Super Bowl. But this team has all the pieces in place. They have all the offensive talent. Amon-Ra St. Brown is somebody that we haven't even mentioned, and he's one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. They obviously have Laporta John. They have Sam Laporta, who's going to be probably once again top of the list. They have Jameson Williams, who was really good in stretches for this team last year. They have so many different offensive pieces that they can utilize. So I think that they are at the top of this division again until proven otherwise. But I think that some of the other teams in this division are going to come chomping at their heels a little bit and not biting at their kneecaps like Dan Campbell probably wants them to. All right, let's jump to the Green Bay Packers. Obviously 11-6 last season. Their win total this year is sitting at 9.5. Quite a few additions to talk about with this team. Mecole Hardman got brought in to catch passes from Jordan Love. Aaron Banks is a guard from San Francisco who's going to be coming in to shore up that offensive line. They got Nate Hobbs on the cornerback room. Draft picks were obviously a lot talked about in the Packers situation. Matthew Golden was drafted, first wide receiver drafted in the first round since, I don't know, Donald Driver, I think, was the last first round wide receiver taken by the Packers team. Anyway, a long time since they've drafted a wide receiver in the first round. Very excited from the Green Bay fans about that particular move. They also drafted Anthony Belton, an offensive tackle from NC State. Losses, they lost Eric Stokes to the cornerback room. We talked about Jair Alexander with the Ravens a little bit earlier in the video. TJ Slayton was a defensive tackle they lost as well. Josh Myers, the center, and then A.J. Dillon has obviously also moved on. What do you kind of think about the Packers going into this season? I'm pretty high on this team. I think that they're going to have a good year this year. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen with the Cheeseheads?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet because I'm weirdly lukewarm on this team. They had 6 receivers play snaps last year. They're bringing all 6 of those guys back, with Reed being the top guy. But Reed kind of fell off really hard in the second half of last season, and I just don't see it here. With you're bringing in a first-round draft pick, yeah, but you don't know if he's a 2 or a 3 or what he's going to be on your team. And I don't know. I just think that if Vsauce would be very mad at this, but this wide receiver room doesn't really kind of inspire a lot of confidence for me. Even if you think Love is a premier quarterback, top 5 quarterback in the NFL, I just think that this isn't the wide receiver room that gets you into like contention to be in the Super Bowl. I know Shaggy Betts thinks that this team could shock a lot of people, but I don't know. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I'm ready to put on my cheese head by week 7, week 8 when this team proves me wrong. But right now, in July, way before training camp starts here, I'm lukewarm on this team, and I can't tell you why. I don't know.
This team was really good last year. They obviously dealt with the Jordan Love injury for most of the season, on and off play time. Malik Willis was really, really good for this team. But I do think that it's going to kind of hinge on if Matthew Golden is good. if Matthew Golden comes in and is pretty good for this team, I feel like this team could compete to win a lot of games and possibly do some damage in the playoffs with how good Josh Jacobs has been for this team as well. Their defense is very good too, very underrated defensively. So I think this team's going to have a lot to say when we get through the rest of this season. Tough division, like we talked about with every other team that we're going to discuss throughout this whole video. But I think that the Packers are going to have a lot to say here. And I think that they could end up being the ones that could possibly be, little foreshadowing for you guys, that could possibly be the top of this division when we get to the end of the season. So, all right, let's move directly and talk about the team that was right underneath them last year, who had an additionally spectacular season, the Minnesota Vikings. 14-3 last year. Now, their win total is very interesting to me, Sukh. 8.5 is their win total after winning 14 games last year, which I thought was incredibly interesting. We'll talk about some of the reasons why. The additions to this team, they added Jonathan Allen, a huge free agency acquisition at the defensive tackle position. They also got Javon Hargrave, defensive tackle as well. I added this as an addition. This isn't really a team addition, but it is an addition to the lineup. J.J. McCarthy will be the starting quarterback for this team because they lost, obviously, Sam Darnold to the Seattle Seahawks. And Cam Bynum obviously is no longer with this team as well. They drafted a guard in the first round and Donovan Jackson. They didn't really have any second-round picks, so then they kind of picked in the later parts of the round. So no other draft picks right now worth mentioning, unless you guys want to go watch some other videos about the in-depth analysis on all the draft picks that the Minnesota Vikings had. But what do you think about this team going into this year? They still have Justin Jefferson, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in football. Aaron Jones is still a very serviceable running back. They have a lot of other pieces in the wide receiver room with Addison, et cetera. They have TJ Hawkinson still there. I mean, they got a lot of weapons. I think it just totally hinge on how the rookie comes out and plays in his first starts in the NFL.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it's just plug and play with JJ and you see that Sam Darnold was just gifted a very good offense, but on the defensive side of the football, you still have Brian Flores with that very exotic defense. And I think even last year, Dallas Turner didn't have the best rookie year, but he was still the 17th overall pick. So maybe he picks it up. But I think the biggest loss here, and I don't know if this is the whole reason we're seeing the win total so low, but with safety Cameron Bynum being gone, I think that really hurts you. He's a really good safety at picking up all the plays and letting all his guys know how to shift the defense. So I was doing my research into the Vikings, that is a big hit for them, and they might already feel that in training camp. So I don't know. I'm surprised at the win total, though. Got to be honest.
I am too. The Cam Bynum mention is very good, especially with how exotic Brian Flores' defense is. Like all the random blitz packages that he puts together, all the complicated coverages that he throws at different quarterbacks. Like Bynum, I think, was the one that was responsible for making sure that all those guys were in the right spot, or maybe plugging some holes when things didn't go exactly right. One of those types of safeties. So they're going to miss him a lot. And yeah, but I think we both agree this is going to hinge on if J.J. McCarthy hits. If he hits, if he's a good quarterback, possibly great this season, this team is going to win 10 to 12 games again. Maybe I don't think they're going to win 14. They overperformed last year by Sam Darnold playing the career of his life. But you got talent. So if the talent works out, if McCarthy hits, if everything goes to plan like they thought they were going into last season before he hurt his meniscus. I mean, he looked pretty good in preseason before he got hurt last year. And there are a lot of people that are very high on this guy. I just think that this is one of those situations where they're going to be in a lot of football games, like you mentioned, because of how good their defense is and how much talent they have offensively. It's just going to depend on if McCarthy can be somewhat the guy. I don't think either one of us expect him to be elite this season, but hey, we saw Jaden Daniels come in last year and be elite right off the jump. So maybe McCarthy will do the same thing this year.
The weird thing, in my opinion, though, is that like the Vikings defense is so good that like they're going to beat just bad or shaky teams. Like they're just going to shock you and blitz you and hit you until you're out of the game. And even if their offense is mediocre, I think they could get over that win total.
Absolutely. But the other side of that, too, is that J.J. McCarthy at that point would then just have to be average. Just don't be bad. Don't throw pick sixes. Don't turn the ball over unnecessarily. Don't be, that type of quarterback that's going to put your team in bad situations. Because as you mentioned, this defense is good enough to win you games. Sam Darnold last year was great, so they ended up winning a lot more games than people expected because he was able to put them over the hump in certain situations. But, I mean, that defense was good enough to win them 7 or 8 games by themselves last year. So going into this year, we'll see if that's the case with J.J. McCarthy at the helm. Last team to mention in this division, Chicago Bears. Now, the Chicago Bears were 5-12 last year. 8.5 is their, or 8.5 is their win total once again, which I think is really interesting. Same exact win total as the Minnesota Vikings by our friends at BetOnline. I've already seen some people talking about how this is one of the highest bet win totals in the entire NFL so far as we sit here on July 16th, getting you guys ready for training camp. So a lot of people are pretty high on the Bears. A lot of people were high on the Bears last year with all the offseason acquisitions that they made. And I can get it why they are high on them once again going into this season. A bunch of additions to this team. So Joe Thuney got brought in at the guard position. Jonah Jackson got brought into the guard position. Drew Dahlman, one of the best centers on the market, got brought in at the center position for this team. They immediately upgraded what was the worst part of their football team last year in the offensive line. They also brought in Grady Jarrett at the defensive tackle position, a little bit older, but still has a lot left in the tank. See how much he affects that defense. And as we mentioned previously, they totally revamped their coaching staff. Ben Johnson is now the head coach for this team. I put / offensive coordinator. They technically have Declan Doyle as their offensive coordinator, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be Ben Johnson running the offense with Declan Doyle calling the plays. It's probably how I would imagine that it's going to go. Or they may have a little bit of a situation. I don't know how that's going to work. Dennis Allen, though, coming to be the defensive coordinator from the Saints is going to be huge. They lost Jenkins, the offensive lineman. They also lost their center, Shelton. Those are probably just more upgrades versus losing necessarily. And then Keenan Allen is no longer with this team as that experiment kind of died. As what we saw with the Bears going into this year. They had a really good draft as they drafted Colston Loveland, a tight end who a lot of people are really high on. Luther Burden, the Missouri wide receiver who looks like he could be a bona fide NFL player. This is another team for me where this is going to depend on how Caleb Williams does this year. If they can give him protection just because of how poor their protection was last year, and a lot of it was play of the offensive line, but a lot of it was Caleb Williams just not doing what he needed to do in the right situations. Because we've talked about this with quarterbacks. Sometimes quarterbacks create sacks for themselves by either holding the ball too long, running into pressure, not getting the ball out when they need to, and then obviously you get sacked. So it looks like an offensive line sack, but it's actually just the quarterback not doing what they're supposed to do. But if Caleb Williams takes a step and is that elite talent like everybody thinks he is, and that he was drafted to be as the number 1 overall pick, with the offensive line help that they brought in, their offense should be automatically better. They still have DeAndre Swift. They still have DJ Moore. They have talent. They have Rome Odunze once again. They also have, Cole Kmet's a great tight end. They drafted Colston Loveland. So they have a lot of good pieces on offense. If Caleb Williams can perform, and if the offensive line can keep him upright, and if Ben Johnson brings in an offense that's going to help him out, this team could be frisky. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think that the smartest thing that they did is that all 3 O linemen that they brought in were veterans, guys that already know how to win, guys that have been around the NFL. So you can really hit the ground running. You're not teaching anybody, hey, Ben Johnson's offense is a little complicated. You're not teaching a young guy from college not just how to play in the NFL, but now you're teaching him an exotic offensive system. No, you're bringing in vets that are probably excited to be part of this new system, excited, like you said, all these options that are there. Everybody's probably really ready to go. So I like that they did that, and I like that they kind of focused in on vets. I think that will pay off for the Bears.
Do I think that this team's going to win 9 games? We're not running to take that bet like a lot of people apparently are. But they have the weapons to. And if they play, their defense was decent last year. Their defense wasn't terrible. But if their offense doesn't put them in bad positions, they also had really bad play calling at the end of games. Their offensive situational play calling, and also just their overall head coaching play situational calling at the end of games was pretty poor in a lot of games. I remember that one on Thanksgiving. I can't remember who they were playing. Was it the Lions they were playing? When they had a chance to kick a field goal to win the game or like tie the game, and then they ended up not doing that. I can't remember what that situation was, but there was a lot of that last year. If you watched Bears games pretty consistently, so hopefully that is something they rectified with the changes in the coaching staff. And again, we'll just see how Caleb Williams progresses into year 2. If he has a big jump and he plays at the talent level that a lot of people think, and a lot of people that the way that they drafted him that he should. And as you mentioned, as these veteran offensive linemen help him out, this team could win quite a few football games. So another really competitive division, man, though. I think we can agree that this division is once again going to be an absolute knockout fest every single time these guys go and play each other. Before we tap off this video, let us know in the comments what you guys think about the NFC North. Who's going to be the king of the North in the NFC? Let us know what you guys think in the comments below on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Spotify. Thanks for listening to the audio edition of this podcast. Sukh? NFC North, if you had to choose a winner, who you taking?
Easy. Lions still. Still the
I went
Lions.
the Lions, eh? Okay. Man, this one's tough for me. I don't really know. I'm going to go Packers just because I really feel like that the Packers have a really good opportunity to have a good season. I think also thanks so much for stopping by right here on the Betting News Network for our breakdown of the AFC and the NFC North going into the 2025 and 2026 NFL season. If you like this content, give a like and subscribe. We're going to be going through every single NFL division throughout the start of the regular season and then giving you guys content throughout the rest of the year. So give us a follow right here on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Spotify, thanks so much for stopping by, and go check us out at bettingnews.com. We appreciate you guys for tuning into the content. You guys came to the winners and you stayed for the vibes. We'll catch you on the next one.